have no family left, now that my ex and my son have cut me out of their lives. So, here I am, sharing what will likely be my last words with strangers. Please excuse any typos. I've never been good with words, and I know it's only a matter of time before I'll be unable to write anything ever again. Marla, Nathan, if you're reading this, I'm sorry for all the pain I've caused. I should have paid more attention to the red flags. Maybe if I had, I wouldn't be holed up in a dark closet in someone's basement, surrounded by a puddle of my own blood. He had looked so nervous when he showed up unannounced, introducing himself as Dave. He'd studied my house as we walked through to my office, as if trying to memorize each detail. What struck me about him, besides the odd smell that clung to his clothes, was how timid and soft-spoken he was. I had to coax him into actually taking a seat and making eye contact with me. Once he did, though, his stare was unnervingly intense, almost predatory. "I need you to watch my wife." I nodded. It was a fairly common request, finding out where the spouse, fiancé, or significant other was during the day, what they were doing, and, oftentimes, who. It isn't the most exciting type of job, but it typically pays fairly well, and usually ends up being safer than many I've taken over the years. After the recent accident, and with the new metal rod in my leg, I was all for something low-key. I laid out the terms of my employment, how much I charge per hour, all that, as he nodded along, never once breaking eye contact. "What's your wife's name?" He stood up so abruptly that he knocked his chair over, and leered at me, eyes narrowed. I tensed, putting my hands up placatingly. I thought he might come over the desk. He shuddered as if trying to shake himself out of it, and then sat back down. "Sorry," he laughed nervously. Of course you wouldn't know that." We sat in silence for a moment. I considered sending him away, but I needed the money, and he'd offered to pay the full amount up front, in cash. The downside of the work I do is that you tend to meet people when they're at their worst, while they're desperate, afraid, frustrated. I made a mental note to try and rent out my old space from before the accident, so in the very least I wouldn't be having these types of meetings in my home. "Where do you think she's going?" "I need you to watch her sleep." Now that gave me pause. Of everything I'd ever been asked to do, something about that made me more anxious. It was her request, he added, perhaps in response to the concern written on my face. And why does she need someone to watch her sleep? He smiled at me for the first time, a bit too widely. "You'll see." I figured that at least she'd been the one to request that I be there, which, while still strange, felt less intrusive. At the time, I wasn't sure why he hired me to watch a sleeping woman at $100 an hour. When that night came, as I sat in my car, I felt my anxiety spike. I'd never done a job like this before in my life, and, while strange, it seemed too good to be true. No crouching in bushes, sitting in a hot car for hours on end. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the image. The momentary crack in Dave's calm persona. The absolute abhorrence with which he looked at me. It all felt wrong. I told myself it was fine. I was just on edge after the accident, and did my usual pre-driving ritual. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Wait. Start the car. Their house looked like your run-of-the-mill colonial from the outside. Well-manicured lawn, cheery flowers, baby blue siding, a porch swing. The inside. Well, the inside was a different story entirely. When Dave opened the door, cobwebs floated through the air from where they'd been disturbed, drifting through the pale moonlight. Dust coated nearly every surface I could see. I clutched my light coat to my body to keep from shivering after I stepped inside. It was a good 30 degrees cooler than I kept my own house. The lights were dim, just barely bright enough for me to see where I was going. It wasn't the dust or the dark or the cold that fazed me, though. It was the smell. From the moment I stepped over the threshold, it hit me. Faint, but immensely unpleasant. Like meat gone bad. Christy is upstairs. The only parts of the house I'd seen so far that weren't in total disarray were the pictures plastered along the entry hall. They were all of Dave with a striking blonde woman. His wife Christy, I guessed. He looked so happy in all of them. A stark contrast to the waxen and grim-faced man I'd come to know. As I kept walking, I passed an end table with pictures of just her. Little trinkets were laid out. A woman's engagement ring. A lock of hair. I realized what I was looking at. It was a shrine. My heart pounded at the thought of what I was possibly walking into. As we approached the dark stairwell, the smell intensified. I still don't know what possessed me to stay. Dave started up the stairs, and after a moment, I followed slowly, clutching the banister and making my way up the best I could. Bad leg? I nodded. By the time we reached the top, the smell of decay and rot had become so strong that it made my eyes water. As he slowly opened the door to the bedroom, I held my breath, both to keep the fetid air from my lungs, and also out of anticipation of what I was about to see. On the bed, bundled up under blankets, was the woman from the pictures, Christy. To my immense relief, she was alive, albeit asleep. There was a single chair facing the bed, which Dave gestured to. "Can I get you something to drink?" he asked as I plopped down none too gracefully. I nodded appreciatively, staring at Christy, still unsure of what was happening and what exactly I was supposed to do. I was surprised when he came back with an entire bottle of whiskey. I asked him if I could take him up on some water instead, and he looked me up and down, before walking away again without a word. As I stared at the small figure in the bed, pale and delicate looking, blonde hair around her like a halo, I realized she looked so familiar. I wondered where I'd seen her before. I only had a moment to ponder that, before the bottle struck me in the head. The last thing I remember was the sting, as alcohol seeped into the wound, doubling the searing pain. When I awoke, I was in a partially finished basement. I felt the cold cement on my cheek as I opened my eyes, to see that Dave was inches from my face, smiling at me. I sat up, woozy. I was near a drain that was flecked with bits of soggy tissue and clumps of hair, and the rancid smell that arose from it hit me in a wave. Blood had stained the concrete. I managed to prop myself up, and then fought the urge to vomit when I saw that a tuft of black hair, still attached to the scalp, had been pinned under my arm and was stuck to my bare flesh. "I'm calling the police," I whispered the empty threat hoarsely. I doubted I could fish the phone out of my pocket faster than he could do whatever he had planned for me. I highly suspected that he'd just tossed me down both flights of stairs. My entire body was throbbing with a dull pain that battled the jagged cuts along my head for attention. "Sure." His laugh unsettled me. Please do that. Please tell them how an unlicensed PI is in my home at 3 a.m., reeking of alcohol. Tell them how you're here to kill my wife a second time. Jesus. I suddenly realized why Christy looked so familiar. It was only for a moment, but it still imprinted on my mind no matter how hard I tried to erase it. I shouldn't have been behind the wheel. A part of me knew I wasn't up to driving. I could have called a cab, an Uber, but I didn't. Her mouth had formed a perfect O, blue eyes wide. Of course she was surprised. She'd been driving on the correct side of the road. She wouldn't have expected to suddenly see headlights pointed at her as I barreled down the small highway going 75. Her reflexes were fast, but in her panic she'd swerved too hard in the opposite direction, and I'd heard the sound of screeching metal and shattering glass as her car wrapped around a tree. I made it out without so much as a scratch. It was almost as if I'd never been there at all. It was a miracle she'd survived. But no, she hadn't, I reminded myself. I'd have stuck around if there was any chance she had still been alive. It was too late. I could tell by looking at her car that there was nothing I could do for her. The news later confirmed my suspicions. Died on the scene. I had a wife, a son, a job, my entire life ahead of me. Later, the guilt and self-loathing would end those relationships anyways. But at the time, all I could think of was what I stood to lose if I got caught. How is she still here? I whispered. Oh, now you remember her. He flashed a bitter smile at me. She was my world, Michael. I couldn't live without her. I found a way where I wouldn't have to. I managed to stand, but found myself backed against a wall. Remaining upright was a struggle. Dave continued towards me. Unsteady, unhinged. There's no way to really, truly bring someone back. Not completely. No matter what you offer in exchange, she's not the same. I wanted to go after you as soon as I found you. But Christy. There used to still be a bit of Christy in there. She convinced me not to. But you did it again. He pointed his head accusingly toward my leg. No one else got hurt this time. I gasped. Never again. I'm sorry, Michael. We just don't believe you. The floorboards above my head creaked. Something heavy was moving across the floor. She's so hungry. It's been difficult. But when you love someone, you make sacrifices for them. I heard her footsteps as she descended the basement stairs. Slow, deliberate. I looked around frantically. He was between me and the only exit, and the windows were far too tiny for me to fit through. The only place I could hide was in a tiny closet on the finished side. I slid along the wall in that direction, as he followed. I've seen it a few times by now. It won't be fast. It will take days of digestion before you're truly dead. But even that is still far faster than you deserve. She leaned forward and peeked her head down at me, grinning. Her blonde hair a curtain through which her eyes glinted in the scant light. She moved unnaturally, and even in the shadows I could see that her skin seemed to be shifting, like whatever was in there was aching to come out. Dave was transfixed as she strode toward us. The look he gave her as she approached was one of sheer adoration, even as what should have been flesh and bone began unfurling to reveal a gaping maw. As she came closer, I could see the hundreds of teeth ringing the now fully opened mouth, and I swung at Dave blindly. I seemed to have caught them both by surprise, allowing me to narrowly avoid being pulled into the living darkness that had once been Chrissy. Instead, she only caught the lower half of my bad leg. The distinct feeling of flesh and bone dissolving away hit me instantly. She began to drag me backwards. I frantically clawed against the rough concrete floor, trying to pull myself towards the tiny closet. Nails shredded, fingertips bloody, when I heard a meaty-sounding rip, and the resistance was finally gone. I tried to ignore the sound of the exposed bone and metal dragging on cement. Tried to stay conscious despite the pain. I managed it just long enough to reach the small, dark space and lock the door from the inside. That was hours ago. I don't know what to do. I can't run. And even if I could, there's no way I could get past them. I hear them on the other side. And every so often, Dave will whisper to her softly. I have no doubt that a flimsy door and a small piece of metal will be no problem for something like her. Whatever she is. The bits and pieces I found of others, unfortunate enough to have met their end in this same closet, confirms that to me. I don't know when she will decide to come for the rest of me. All I can think about is how any moment now could be my last. I cannot stop vividly picturing what my death will be like at her hands. This is not a plea for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I just need to tell someone what happened to me. I need someone to know what I did. I have a feeling that soon, this, and a few pieces of indigestible hair, bone, and a metal rod, will be all that remains of me. Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed today's first of 2 stories. I want to take a quick second to remind you to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. It really helps the channel grow and reach more new people. I was checking recently and saw that around half the people who watch the channel aren't yet subscribed, so I hope you'll take a quick second to hit that button if you haven't yet. Alright, now on to our next story. Aside from the slow and steady hoof falls of the large draft horses against the ancient stone road, or the continuous creaking of the nearly as ancient caravan wagon's wheels, Horace was sure he couldn't hear anything at all. In the fading autumn light, all he could see for miles around were the silhouettes of enormous petrified trees, having stood dead now for centuries, but still refusing to fall. Their bark had turned an unnatural and oddly lustrous black, one that seemed almost liquid, as it glistened in whatever light happened to gleam off its surface. They seemed more like geysers of oil that had burst forth from the earth only to freeze in place before a single drop could fall back to the ground, never to melt again. Aside from those forsaken and foreboding trees, the land was desolate and gray, with tendrils of cold and damp mist lazily snaking their way over hills and through the forest. Nothing grew here, and yet it was said that some twisted creature still lingered, as unable to perish as the accursed trees themselves. The horses seemed oddly unperturbed by their surroundings, however, and Crassus, Horace's elderly traveling companion, casually struck a match to light his long pipe.
Don't go getting too anxious now, laddie,
he cautioned, no doubt having noticed how tightly Horace was clutching his blunderbuss.
Silver buckshot ain't cheap. You don't be firing that thing unless it's a matter of life and death. You hear me?
I hear you, Crassus. Horace nodded, despite not easing his grip on the rifle. Does silver actually do any good anyway? Things that live out in the twisting withers aren't lichens or revenants, I mean.
Burning lunar caustic in the lamps keeps them at bay, so at the very least they don't care much for the stuff,
Crassus replied.
It doesn't kill them because they can't die, which is why the buckshot is so effective. All the little bits of silver shrapnel are next to impossible for them to get out, so they just stay embedded in their flesh, burning away. A few times I've come across one I've shot before, and let me tell you, they were a sorry sight to behold. So long as we're packing, they won't risk an attack, which is why it's important you don't waste your shot. They're gonna try to scare you, get you to shoot off into the dark, and that's when they'll swoop in. You're not gonna pull that trigger unless one is at point-blank range, you got that?
Yes, Crassus, I got it. Horace nodded once again. You've seen them up close, then?
Aye. And you'll be getting yourself a nice proper view yourself here too long. Ne'er you mind,
Crassus assured him. And are they what people say they are? Horace asked tentatively.
Bloody hell would I know. I'm old, not a historian,
Crassus scoffed.
Not even when I was a youngin'. The twisting withers have been around since before living memory. Centuries, at least. Nothing here but dead trees that won't rot. Nothing living here but things what can't die.
Folks blame the Covenhood for the withers. At least when there are no witches or clerics in Airshot. Horace said softly, looking around as if one of them might be hiding behind a tree trunk or inside their crates. The Covenhood tried to eradicate a heretical cult. The dark magic that was unleashed desolated everything and everyone inside of a 100-mile stretch. Even after all this time, the land's never healed. The curse has never lifted. Whatever happened here, it must have been horrid beyond imagining.
Best not to dwell on it,
Crassus recommended.
This is just a creepy old road with a few nasties lurking in the shadows. Not so different from 100 other roads in Whitacre. I've made this run plenty of times before. Never ran into anything a shot from a blunderbuss couldn't handle.
But the Twisted, Horace insisted, his head pivoting about as if he feared the mere mention of the name would cause them to appear.
They're twisted. That's all that need be said,
Crassus asserted.
But they're twisted men. Women, children, creatures. Whatever was living in this place before it became the Withers was twisted by that same dark magic,
Horace said.
Utterly ruined, but unable to die.
You said this place has been this way since beyond living memory, but they might still remember. Somewhere deep down.
Enough. You're here to shoot 'em, not sympathize with 'em,
Crassus ordered.
If you want to be making out of the Withers alive, you pull that trigger the first clean shot you get. You hear me, lad?
I hear you, boss. I hear you. Horace nodded with a resigned sigh, returning to his vigil of the ominous forest around them. As the wagon made its way down the long and bumpy road, the light grew even fainter. Horace started hearing quick and furtive rustling in the surrounding woods. He could have convinced himself that it was merely the nocturnal movements of ordinary woodland critters. If only he were in an ordinary woodland.
That's them?
He asked, his hushed whisper as loud as he dared to make it.
Nothing in the Twisted Withers but the Twisted,
Crassus nodded.
Don't panic. The lamp's burning strong, and they can see your blunderbuss plain as day. We got nothing to worry about.
We're surrounded, Horace hissed. Though, in truth, the sounds he was hearing could have been explained by as few as one or two creatures.
Can't you push the horses harder? That's what they want. If we go too fast on this old road, we risk toppling over,
Crassus replied.
Just keep a cool head now. Don't spook the horses, and don't shoot at a false charge. Don't let them get to you.
Horace nodded, and tried to do as he was told. The sounds were sparse and quick, and each time he heard them, he swore he saw something darting by in the distance or in the corner of his eye. He would catch the briefest of glances of strange shapes gleaming in the harvest moonlight, or pairs of shining eyes glaring at him, before vanishing back into the darkness. Pitter-pattering footfalls or the sounds of claws scratching at tree bark echoed off of unseen hills or ruins, and, without warning, a haggard voice broke into a fit of cackling laughter.
Can they still talk? Horace whispered. If we don't listen, it don't matter now, do it?
Crassus replied.
You're not helpful at all, you know that?
Horace snapped back.
What am I supposed to do if these things start...
He was abruptly cut off by the sound of a deep, rumbling bellow coming from behind them. He froze nearly solid then, and for the first time since they started their journey, old Crassus finally seemed perturbed by what was happening.
Oh no, not that one,
he muttered. Very slowly, he and Horace leaned outwards and looked back to see what was following them. There, in the forested gloom, lurked a giant of a creature. At least 3 times the height of a man, but its form was so obscured it was impossible to say any more than that.
Is it a troll?
Horace whispered.
It was. Or at least I pray it was. But it's twisted now. And that's all that matters.
Crassus replied softly. What did you mean by not that one? Horace asked. You've seen this one before?
A time or two, aye. Many years ago and many years apart,
Crassus replied.
On the odd occasion, it takes a mind to shadow the wagons for a bit. We just need to stay calm. Keep moving, and it will lose interest.
The horses can outrun a lumbering behemoth like that, surely? Horace asked pleadingly.
I already told you. We can't risk going too fast on this miserable road,
Crassus said through his teeth.
But if memory serves, there's a decent stretch not too far up ahead. We make it that far, we can leave Tiny back there in our dust. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good. Horace nodded fervidly, though his eyes remained fixed on the shadowed colossus prowling up behind them. Though it was still merely following them and had not yet given chase, it was gradually gaining ground. As it slowly crept into the light of the lunar caustic lamp, Horace was able to get a better look at the monstrous creature. It moved on all fours, walking on its knuckles like the beastmen of the impenetrable jungles to the south. Its skin was sagging, and hung in heavy, uneven folds that seemed to throw it off center and gave it a peculiar limp. Scaly, diseased patches mottled its dull gray hide, and several cancerous masses gave it a horrifically deformed, hunched back. Its bulbous head had an enormous dent in its cranium, sporadically dotted by a few stray hairs. A pair of large and askew eye sockets sat utterly empty and void, and Horace presumed that the creature's blindness was the reason for both its hesitancy to attack and its tolerance for the lunar caustic light. It had a snub nose, possibly the remnant of a proper one that had been torn off at some point, and its wide mouth hung open loosely, as though there were something wrong with its jaw. It looked to be missing at least half its teeth, and the ones it still had were crooked and festering, erupting out of a substrate of corpse-blue gums. It's malformed. It couldn't possibly run faster than us. Couldn't possibly, Horace whispered.
Don't give it a reason to charge before we hit the good stretch of road, and we'll leave it well behind us,
Crassus replied. The twisted troll flared its nostrils, taking in all the scents that were wafting off the back of the wagon. The odor of the horses and the men, of wood and old leather, of burning tobacco and lamp oil. None of these scents were easy to come by in the twisting withers. Whenever the troll happened upon them, it could not help but find them enticing, even if they were always accompanied by a soft, searing sensation against its skin. Crassus, Horace whispered hoarsely. Its hide's smoldering.
Good. That means the lunar caustic lamp is doing its job,
Crassus replied. But it's not stopping, Horace pointed out in barely restrained panic.
Don't worry. The closer it gets, the more it will burn,
Crassus tried to reassure him. It's getting too close. I'm going to put more lunar caustic in the lamp, Horace said.
Don't you dare put down that gun, lad,
Crassus ordered. It's overdue. It's not bright enough, Horace insisted, dropping the blunderbuss and turning to root around in the back of the wagon.
Boy, you pick up that gun right this,
Crassus hissed, before being cut off by a high-pitched screeching. A twisted creature burst out of the trees and charged the horses, screaming in agony from the lamplight before retreating back into the dark. It had been enough, though. The horses neighed in terror as they broke into a gallop, thundering down the road at breakneck speed. With a guttural howl, the twisted troll immediately gave chase, its uneven, quadrupedal gait slapping against the ancient stone as its mutilated flesh jostled from one side to the other. Crassus, rein those horses in, Horace demanded, as he was violently tossed up and down by the rollicking wagon.
I can't slow us down now. That thing will have us for sure,
Crassus shouted back, as he desperately clutched onto the reins, trying to at least keep the horses on a straight course.
All we can do now is drive, and hope it gives up before we crash. Hold on.
Another bump sent Crassus bouncing up in his seat, and Horace nearly up to the ceiling, before crashing back down to the floor. various bits of merchandise falling down to bury him. He heard the twisted troll roar ferociously, now undeniably closer than the last time.
Crassus, we're not losing it. I'm gonna try shooting it,
Horace said, as he picked himself off the floor and grabbed his blunderbuss, before heading towards the back of the wagon.
It's no good. It's too big and its hide's too thick. You'll only enrage it, and leave us vulnerable to more attacks,
Crassus insisted.
Get up here with me, and let the bloody thing wear itself out.
Horace didn't listen. The behemoth seemed relentless to his mind. It was inconceivable that it would tire before the horses. The blunderbuss was their only hope. He held the barrel as steady as he could, as the wagon wobbled like a drunkard, and was grateful his chosen weapon required no great accuracy at aiming. The twisted troll roared again, so closely now that Horace could feel the hot miasma of its rancid breath upon him. The fact that it couldn't close its mouth gave Horace a strange sense of hope. Surely some of the buckshot would strike its palate and gull it, and surely those would be sensitive enough injuries to deter it from further pursuit. Surely. Not daring to waste another instant, Horace took his shot. As the blast echoed through the silent forest, and the hot silver slag flew through the air, the twisted troll dropped its head at just the right moment, taking the brunt of the shrapnel in its massive hump. If the new wounds were even so much as an irritant to it, it didn't show it.
Blast,
Horace cursed, as he struggled to reload his rifle. A chorus of hideous cackling rose out from just beyond the tree line, and they could hear a stampede of malformed feet trampling through the underbrush.
Oh, you've done it now. You've really gone and done it now,
Crassus despaired, as he attempted to pull out his flintlock with one hand, as he held the reins in the other. A twisted creature jumped upon their wagon from the side, braving the light of the lunar lamp for only an instant, before it was safely in the wagon's shadow. As it clung on for dear life, it clumsily swung a stick nearly as long as it was, as it attempted to knock the lamp off its hook.
Hey, none of that, you!
Horace shouted, as he pummeled the canvas roof with the butt of his blunderbuss, in the hopes of knocking the creature off, hitting nothing but the weathered hemp with each blow. It was not until he heard the sound of glass crashing against the stone road that he finally lost any hope that they might survive. Crassus fired his flintlock into the dark, but the twisted creature swarmed the wagon from all sides. They shoved branches between the spokes of the wheel, and within a matter of seconds, the wagon was completely overturned. As he lay crushed by the crates and covered by the canvas, Horace was blind to the horrors going on around him. He could hear the horses bolting off, but could hear no sign that the twisted were giving chase. Whatever it was they wanted them for, it couldn't possibly have been for food. He heard Crassus screaming and pleading for mercy as he scuffled with their attackers, the old man ultimately being unable to offer any real resistance as they dragged him off into the depths of the withers. Horace lay as still as he could, trying his best not to breathe or make any sounds at all. Maybe they would overlook him, he thought. Though he was sure the crates had broken, or at least bruised his ribs, maybe he could lie in wait until dawn. With the blunderbuss as his only protection, maybe he could travel the rest of the distance on foot before sundown. Maybe he could. These delusions swiftly ended, as the canvas sheet was slowly pulled away, revealing the twisted troll looming over him. Other twisted creatures circled around them, each of them similarly yet uniquely deformed. With a casual sweeping motion, the troll batted away the various crates, and the other twisted regarded them with the same general disinterest. Trade goods were of no use or value to being so far removed from civilized society. Horace's eyes rapidly darted back and forth between them, as he awaited their next move. What did they even want him for? They didn't eat, or didn't need to, anyway. Did they just mean to kill him for sport or spite? Why risk attacking unless they stood to benefit from it? The troll picked him up by the scruff of the neck, with an odd sense of delicacy, holding him high enough for all its cohorts to see him, or perhaps so that he could see them. More of the Twisted began crawling out on the road, and Horace saw that they were marked in hideous sigils, made with fresh blood. Blood that could have only come from Crassus.
The old man didn't have much left in him,
one of them barked hoarsely. It stumbled towards him on multiple mangled limbs, and he could still make out the entry wounds where the silver buckshot had marred it so many years ago.
Ounce by ounce, body by body, the bloody ritual we began a millennium ago draws nearer to completion. The Covenhood could not stop us. Delayed, yes. But what does that matter, when we now have all eternity to fulfill our aims?
The being, the sorcerer, Horace realized, hobbled closer, slowly rising up higher and higher, on hind limbs too grotesque and perverse in design for Horace to make any visual sense of it. As it rose above Horace, it smiled at him with a lipless mouth that had been sliced from ear to ear, revealing a set of long and sharpened teeth, richly carved from the blackened wood of the twisted trees. A long and flickering tongue weaved a delicate dance between them, while viscous blood slowly oozed from gangrenous gums. Its eyelids had been sutured shut, but an unblinking black and red eye with a serpentine pupil sat embedded upon its forehead. Several of the twisted creatures reverently placed a ceremonial bowl of twisted wood beneath Horace, a bowl that was still freshly stained with the blood of his companion. Though his mind had resigned itself to his imminent demise, he nonetheless felt his muscles tensing, and his heart beat furiously, as his body demanded a response to his mortal peril. The sorcerer sensed his duplicity, and reveled in it, chuckling sadistically as he theatrically raised a long dagger with an undulating serpentine blade, and held it directly above Horace's heart.
Not gonna give me the satisfaction of squirming, eh? Commendable,
it sneered.
May the blood spilt this moon herald a new age of flesh reborn. Ave, Ophion, Orbis, Ouroboros!
As the twisted sorcerer spoke its incantation, it drove its blade into Horace's heart, and skewered him straight through. His blood spilled out his backside, and dripped down the dagger into the wooden bowl below, the twisted wasting no time in painting themselves with his vital fluids. As his chest went cold and still, and his vision went dark, the last thing Horace saw was the sorcerer pulling out its dagger, his dismembered heart still impaled upon it. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.